Let's be honest, the Canon R6 Mark II nailed a lot for hybrid shooters, but after using it extensively, there are some clear, targeted changes that I would love to see in the upcoming R6 Mark III. In this video, I'm going to dive straight into my top requested upgrades, which include sharper sensor tech, better recording features, and next generation autofocus. There's some small design tweaks that I'd like to see as well, so let's jump in. Now, before we get started into this deep dive, I want to let you know that I do own the R6 Mark II. I've had it for years. Before that, I had the R6. Before that, I had the Canon EOS R, and my daily shooter for portrait photography is the R5. I am steeped in the Canon R ecosystem, and I'm actually shooting on the R6 Mark II right now. So let's start at the heart of any camera, which is the sensor. And if you've used the R6 Mark II, you know it is rocking a 24.2 megapixel CMOS sensor, and this was a slight bump from the original 20 megapixel sensor in the R6. Now, while that increase doesn't necessarily translate into huge improvements in detail, for most users, it brings Canon in line with most other competitors at this price point, at least as far as full frame models are concerned. But I would like to see Canon go just a little bit further. And if rumors pan out, we could see the R6 Mark III land a 30 to 32 megapixel sensor, which would give users more cropping flexibility, especially for sports, wildlife, and high resolution commercial shooting. And that's important not just for print and photo work, but for everyday photographers who need to crop just a little bit tighter without losing as much quality. But when we talk about the sensor, we need to talk about rolling shutter. Now, on the Mark II, the sensor's faster readout made the rolling shutter almost a non-issue for regular action and even for electronic shutter shooting at up to 40 frames per second. Though it isn't in the same league as the truly stacked sensors like the R3 or the Sony A9. Having a stacked CMOS sensor would take things even further, potentially delivering less distortion at higher potential dynamic range, while keeping high-speed burst modes viable for serious action. Now, speaking of dynamic range, the Mark II holds up against its peers, but it's not a standout. And depending on who you listen to, somewhere between 11.5 and 12 stops of dynamic range. But in some cases, there's also some weird stuff going on with how it handles some of those lower end stops. And you can check out my real world comparison of the R5 and the R6 Mark II. I'll link that above and below. Now, lifting the shadows up to 5 stops is possible before significant noise starts to creep in. And in real world use, the performance of up to ISO 12800 is actually quite good. But deeper shadows can get rather smudgy, which is a sign that Canon is still applying aggressive noise reduction, which then starts to eat into recoverable detail. So for the R6 Mark III, having better shadow retention, highlight recovery, and more flexible raw output would be a meaningful leap, especially for landscape, portrait, and event photo shooters who need to push their photos in post. Making 14-bit RAW available across all shooting modes would help, but incorporating a stacked sensor would be the technical solution to both the dynamic range and any rolling shutter issues, giving photographers more headroom, especially in challenging lighting environments. Moving away from the sensor specifically, I want to talk about video recording capabilities. So if you're shooting video on the R6 Mark II, I'm shooting video right now, you're already getting solid internal 4K up to 60p. And this is oversampled from the 6K sensor. It uses the full width, no crop. In fact, it actually has a better full width than even the R5, which when you switch it into DCI mode, actually just crops the top. Now, additionally, the R6 Mark II, when you compare it to the R5 or the first R6, has considerably better thermal management. There's also 6K RAW when using an Atomos recorder, 10-bit 422 internal files for recording in C-Log, and high frame rates in Full HD up to 180 frames per second. But let's get a little bit more granular here with what I think is still missing. First, from a high frame rate slow motion perspective, 180 frames per second in Full HD is solid for creative work and practical for sport. But if Canon could push that up to 240 or include 4K in 120 without compromising autofocus or adding additional image compression or crop, that would be a big win for professionals who need slow motion in their work. Another key upgrade that I'd like to see is internal ProRes RAW recording, not just with an external via Atomos, which right now Atomos is the only company that you can use their recorder with to get ProRes RAW out of the R6. There's no other codec options, there's no other recorder options. being able to shoot internally would significantly streamline workflows and avoid the kind of fragile micro HDMI port that we currently have on the R6 Mark II, which is another thing that they absolutely need to replace. And they've done that on the R1 and they've done it on the R5 Mark II. So the assumption is with the R6 Mark III, we would get the full-size HDMI. Let's use that full-size HDMI to continue being able to do external recording, but let's be able to do it internally as well. Let's close the gap for hybrid competitors who offer robust internal codecs. Now, even with the current setup, being able to record full HD proxies simultaneously with external 6K RAW is nice, but it'd be nicer to be able to do it all internally. Additionally, we need to talk about color. Now, Canon is always described as having amazing color science, but if you're shooting on the R6 Mark II and you've got friends, like I do, who are shooting on Sony, they're shooting in S-Log3. Or if they're shooting with newer Canon cameras, they're shooting with C-Log2, which is a much better log curve. There's not currently any support for C-Log2 in the R6 Mark II unless you shoot in RAW and then process it as C-Log2. Although considering the fact that that signal is not understood to be a full 12-bit readout of the sensor, you don't really get a whole lot of improved dynamic range shooting in C-Log2 or interpolating to C-Log2 off the R6 Mark II with an external recorder. So if we can get real 12-bit ProRes RAW internal with C-Log2, we would be able to realize additional stops of dynamic range, even if there wasn't an improvement in the sensor. But if there was, we'd still see another full stop of additional dynamic range out of a raw output. But if we did have C-Log2, we could see an additional one-stop improvement from the current C-Log3. And while we're at it, when we talk about log profiles, I'd like to be able to add preview LUTs of my own. While Canon's version 2 of their Cinema Gamut LUTs are quite good when used in your NLE, I find that when comparing just log footage with the LUT applied paired to View Assist, which is their version of the LUT in the viewfinder and on the screen, I find that it really doesn't work exceptionally well, and it doesn't match what I end up seeing in my nonlinear editor. I want that kind of control in the camera. Finally, when we talk about video, I want to talk about overheating and recording limits. Now, on the R6 Mark II, Canon did solve most of the overheating issues with the original R6. You can record 4K 60 for about 45 minutes at room temperature before thermal limits kick in. And standard 4K 30 and 24 is effectively unlimited, and that's still a downsampled image. But for the next version, I'd still like to see more heat dissipation so that we can shoot 4K 60 for longer. My hope would be that they could add some of the improvements that they added to the R5 with the Mark II to the Mark III of the R6. I don't think we need a fan, but some improved passive cooling and process enhancements to some of the chips would be appreciated. So if you're pushing high resolution, long form interviews, is better thermal management for internal 4K 60 or 6K RAW a deal breaker for you? Or are you happy with what they have now? Next, let's talk about some of the recording, workflow, and memory card upgrades that I'd like to see in this camera, starting with media. So in the current R6 Mark II, media workflow is reliable, but it's not exactly bleeding edge. You do have dual UHS-2 SD card slots, which are solid for most stills, and 4K up to 60 FPS. But if you're capturing 40 frame per second RAW bursts, or you're dealing with high bitrate RAW files, buffer clearing and slowdowns can be very write speed dependent. And so this can bottleneck your shoot. So that's why I think the logical wish list item is for them to include a CF Express card slot, at least one, in addition to a UHS-2 slot, like the Canon implementation on the R5. In fact, if Canon really wants to upset the apple cart here, I think they need to include a Type A slot, like Sony has, to allow us to choose which kind of card we want and still have two slots. That would allow me as a still shooter to go out with maybe just dual SD card slots that are a little less expensive, but if I want to switch to CF Express, I can, and I'm not limited in what I can put in my camera. But at a minimum, I think adding one CF Express card slot would be helpful. That would add substantially higher write speeds for RAW stills, video codecs like RAW, and high-res proxy files. There are a lot of people out there that are actively requesting this and discussing it as a needed upgrade. But on the subject of proxy recording, on the R6 Mark II, you can record full HD proxy footage alongside external 6K RAW, which is a helpful addition for speeding up large projects. I'd like to see proxy come to the creation of more internal video modes. Make it possible to auto-link the proxies and the full res files in third-party editors, not just in Canon's own software. I'd also love to see additional information provided in sidecar files for metadata like you get on some of the newer cameras. Next, and still on the video side of things, exposure tools. The Mark II finally added false color displays and video markers. Although as someone who shoots with an external monitor, I can't use Canon's false color because it won't come through the HDMI out. So I have to use the false color that's provided on my monitor, which is good, but they don't always match. And if you use false color, you can't simultaneously have audio meters or histograms. Again, I'm dependent on my external monitor, which means that I have to basically pack it all the time. And if I'm going on a super lightweight shoot, or if I'm out in maybe an adventure scenario where I'm recording myself and I don't want to lug the additional equipment and batteries and cables, that makes it really complicated. If anything, just the fact that when I hit the record button, my histogram and my level goes away. That drives me crazy. That's a friction point for solo shooters and anyone who needs exposure confirmation in real time. My hope is that the Mark III is a fully customizable on-screen toolset with histogram, level, audio, and focus peaking all at once while recording. So adding a single CF Express slot and adding pro exposure tools would help close the gap, especially for wedding shooters, documentary filmmakers, and anyone who needs a streamlined workflow from capture all the way through to the edit suite. Now, I've been talking a lot about my experience with this camera, but let me just let you know that this video does have a sponsor, and that sponsor is me. And unless I say otherwise, every one of the videos on this channel is backed by my photography business. YouTube ad revenue is very nice, but it doesn't keep the lights on. I am a working professional photographer and videographer, and this is how I make a living. I specialize in portraits, events, weddings, and photo and video work for small businesses. So if you're in Las Vegas or Southern California and you need a professional to make you, your family, or your business look amazing, you can quickly book on my website. I offer free mini sessions as well as package and daily rates. The busy season's about to hit, so grab your spot before I'm fully booked. Next, let's talk about autofocus. Autofocus is the backbone of any hybrid camera, whether you're capturing stills or video. And the R6 Mark II set a new benchmark for Canon with its subject recognition, capable of tracking people, animals, including horses, birds, and even vehicles like cars, trains, and aircraft. And the system is powered by machine learning. And in practice, it nails subject focus most of the time, with left eye and right eye selection, 3 flexible AF zones and modes, and really, you can tune it how you need based on the performance that you're looking for. But despite all of this, there is room to innovate. And for the R6 Mark III, the top request is user-controlled registration and prioritization of specific people or subjects, which Canon calls people priority. Now that means that you could program the AF to always look for a particular person in frame first, even in group scenarios. It would also be really great to set a do not track override for background faces. Now this feature already exists in the R3, and while it's definitely on my list, I pretty much expect this to exist in the R6 Mark II. And while auto switching is smart, you can't yet precisely set priority, like always telling your camera to pick certain people over vehicles or vice versa. And that's a big deal for event and sports photographers, where the wrong subject can ruin a split-second shot. This has been executed especially well on newer Canon cameras, and I expect this to be an advancement that they add to the new R6. And for video shooters, we should expect continued improvement, but note that the Mark II's video AF isn't as reliable as stills, and sometimes hunts in complex scenes. Fine-tuning these algorithms and allowing more user-adjusted subject priority and control would be a huge leap. I would also like to see something like a controllable tap to focus, like an auto rack focus option. This is something that you can program into competitors' cameras that you can't yet do in Canon cameras. While you can control the speed at which it might switch subjects, how sticky it is, or how smooth those focus moves are, I want something almost like tracking functionality point to point, but for focus, like something you put on a gimbal or a slider. And as people photograph increasingly dynamic scenes like concerts, sports, weddings, having more predictive programmable autofocus can help you consistently hit critical moments that matter to you and your client, as well as your portfolio, and can help considerably if you're by yourself. We don't always have talented first ACs in our back pocket or second shooters that we can trust to hit that focus. Next, let's dig into how the camera feels and functions in the hand. That's something that impacts every frame that you capture. And if you've used the R6 Mark II or the R5 or the R5 Mark II, you know that Canon is very good at ergonomics. And they've not had to make considerable changes from model to model. The R6 Mark II is almost identical to the original in grip, dials, and button layout, with a few changes aimed at hybrid shooters. And some of those changes have made their way to the R5 Mark II and the R1, specifically the movement of the power switch and the dedicated photo and video modes. So having that dedicated stills and video switch, as well as having more customizable buttons, has been super helpful. The newly placed multifunction button has been great. but some changes aren't universally loved. For example, the R6 Mark II's video and still switch can be bumped accidentally, and some users miss the concave joystick of the earlier model. But for the R6 Mark III, the priority improvements that I would include are refining the button placement and making those buttons even more customizable. I do not need a dedicated rating button or a trash can button. Just give me more custom buttons that I can do whatever I want with. Because as I switch from photo to video, those buttons need to do different things for me. And while you can customize these modes, you can't access every single feature. Additionally, the custom modes exist, and you do have 3 of them, but there are still some settings that you cannot adjust from custom mode to custom mode. In my mind, every single customizable setting in the camera should be adjustable in those custom modes. That's a change I think Canon should make across the board, not just in the R6 Mark III. And as a quick real-world note, weather sealing is solid on this camera. I can tell you that the R6 Mark II, I've dropped it quite a few times. I dropped it right into beach sand, where it was like half in the beach sand, with all the doors, like the flaps were all open, because I was using it to record video, and it just fell right over. Everything seemed fine. No problems. I'm sure the next time that I send it into Canon Professional Services, they're gonna send me back a little baggie full of beach sand. But the build from the R6 to the R6 Mark II felt just a little bit more plasticky. And as someone who shot for years with the Canon 7D Mark I, the first Canon 7D, and you could basically bang nails into wood with that camera, I would appreciate just a little bit more of a metal feel, a little bit more heft. Not heavier, but heft. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but Fuji and Nikon and Sony seem to have cameras that feel less like they're made out of plastic and more like they're made out of metal, whereas Canon cameras have tended to, well, just feel a little less metal. So in conclusion, I don't want to make this sound like I'm bagging on the R6 Mark II or on really any of Canon's cameras. I really do like my Canon cameras. And I think that there's definitely innovation coming from Canon in a number of different areas, especially when it comes to their speed, video capabilities, and their autofocus for sure. But I think there are improvements that can be made, especially in this camera, which I feel is at an inflection point for both hybrid shooters and also where prosumers and hobbyists and enthusiasts really kind of come together. The number of people that I see in my social media feeds that are not only shooting with the R6 and the R6 Mark II, but excited to say, I finally got my dream camera, and it's the R6 Mark II. That tells me that with just a few tweaks, like adding additional codec options, like 4K 120, 6K RAW, give us a couple of all-eye shooting modes, maybe give us 4K 24 and not just 23978. Give us a full HDMI port, give us a CF Express slot. And then let's just take a few of those autofocus things that we've gained in the R3 and the R5 Mark II and the R1, like people priority and maybe even action priority. Not even asking for the eye autofocus system. Let's keep the cost down. And while I would love to see a resolution bump, I wouldn't trade the ability to have a full width 6K signal downscaled into 4K for that super clear look. I wouldn't trade that for higher resolution. Heck, keep it at 40 frames a second. Just give us 14-bit RAW. Small, incremental changes. That's what we're looking for. You do that, Canon, and we'll continue to support you as consumers. But speaking of support, if you want to support what I'm doing here, consider becoming a channel member. It's $1. And if you're looking to book a photo or video session, all the details are down below, including access to my free mini sessions, along with gear and deal lists, including everything I use to make my videos. Now, those links do go to help the channel, but as always, the easiest way to support me here is just to hit the like and subscribe button. Those buttons are both free, and they go a long way to helping me grow here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.